So, if you force yourself to eat, like, a dry, flavorless salad while you're stressing out at your desk,
Which is, something a lot of us do.
oh, constantly. But if you do that, you might actually absorb fewer nutrients than if you just took the time to sit down and eat a slightly less nutritious meal that you, well, genuinely loved.
Yeah, it's a pretty profound shift in perspective. We spend so much time obsessing over the chemical breakdown of our food,
Right.
but we completely ignore the biological state of our bodies while we're actually eating it.
And I mean, that obsession is just exhausting. You know, when you're driving somewhere new and you're relying entirely on your GPS, but it's clearly broken.
Oh yeah, the worst.
Right. It tells you to turn left, then suddenly recalculates and screams at you to make a U-turn. And before you know it, you are completely lost.
Exactly.
Navigating modern food and diet advice feels exactly like that broken GPS. I mean, one decade we're told to avoid eggs at all costs, and the next we're supposed to eat them every single day.
The sheer volume of contradictory information out there is just overwhelming. People are constantly trying to recalculate their meals based on whatever the latest sensationalized headline is.
Which is exactly why we're taking this deep dive today. We want to sort through this for you. And we've gathered a massive stack of sources for this
A
one.
very comprehensive stack, yeah.
Yeah, we're pulling from academic textbook excerpts on nutritional science, Michael Pollan's famous food philosophy, some really illuminating global data on mindful snacking.
Which is super interesting data, by the way.
It totally is. Plus, we've got practical guides from a registered dietitian on flexible meal planning and everyday lifestyle tips from Harvard Health and single ingredient foods.
But just to be clear, the goal here is absolutely not to hand down another set of rigid rules.
Not at all. Our mission today is to cut through that contradictory health noise. We want to give you, the listener, a stress-free, highly enjoyable, and practical shortcut to being truly well-informed about your food.
Right, so no restrictive diets, no feeling overwhelmed, just a new way to understand the mechanisms of how and why you eat.
Exactly. But to do that effectively, we first have to understand why the supermarket feels like such a confusing place to begin with.
Yeah, if we look at our first source, Nutritional Science Basics, it defines nutrition as the study of the biological and chemical aspects of macro and micronutrients.
Okay, sounds very clinical.
Highly clinical. And while that level of chemical analysis is, vital for research, it's an incredibly impractical way for the average person to navigate a grocery aisle.
It's just not how human beings operate. I mean, nobody walks down the produce aisle thinking, I wonder how my biological pathways will metabolize the micronutrients in this spinach today.
Right, we just want to make a salad that tastes good.
Exactly.
But what's fascinating here is that when we attempt to reduce food to nothing more than its chemical components, like when we try to eat purely by the numbers,
Yeah.
we open ourselves up to sophisticated marketing manipulation. The food industry actually thrives on this reductionism.
Oh, for sure. They love it.
They use scientific-sounding buzzwords to create this false sense of health. Take product labels, for instance. You might pick up a brand of highly processed fruit-flavored yogurt because it has this big doctor-recommended sticker right on the front.
I have definitely put those in my cart. I mean, it feels like a safe, responsible choice when you're in a hurry.
It's entirely engineered to make you feel that way. But the mechanism behind that label is pretty deceptive. Doctors generally recommend yogurt for digestive health because of the naturally occurring probiotics.
Right.
They're absolutely not recommending that specific sugar-loaded commercial brand. The label is technically leveraging a broad scientific truth to sell you a highly processed product.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a classic supermarket science trap.
So we find ourselves just stuck between flip-flopping academic studies and these really misleading marketing labels, which brings us to Michael Pollan's philosophy, which I love because it cuts through all of that noise beautifully.
It really does.
His famous rule is just 7 words long. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants.
It's brilliant in its simplicity. When he says eat food, he's referring to real whole food. The kind of food your great-grandparents would recognize.
Without needing a chemistry degree to read the ingredients list.
Exactly. He draws a hard line between actual food and what he calls edible food-like substances, which are those highly engineered products in the brightly colored, crinkly bags.
And his practical advice to achieve this is to literally step outside of the supermarket environment. He argues that supermarkets are physically designed to push instant noodles, diet sodas, hyper-processed stuff.
Right, the whole layout is a trap.
Yeah, so instead he advocates for shopping at farmers markets. He also points to the Okinawan philosophy of harahachibu, which translates to eating until you're about 80% full, rather than eating until you're completely stuffed.
And that Okinawan practice is actually rooted in some really fascinating biology.
Oh, how so?
Well, when your stomach expands during a meal, gastric stretch receptors in the stomach wall send signals via the vagus nerve to your brain.
Okay, tracking.
But the hormone leptin, which is what actually produces the neurological sensation of feeling full and satisfied, that takes about 20 minutes to reach peak levels in your bloodstream.
So there's a lag time.
Exactly. So by aiming for 80% fullness and stopping, you're essentially giving your biological signaling system the time it needs to catch up to your stomach.
That makes perfect sense. You're buffering for the biological delay.
Precisely. And Pollan's larger point is about reconnecting with the source of our nourishment. We see this principle in action with programs like the Edible Schoolyard Project in the U.S.
Oh, I've read about them.
Yeah, they take kids out of the cafeteria and have them actually grow, harvest, and cook their own vegetables. Touching the dirt and seeing the process literally rewrites a child's psychological relationship with food.
It moves eating from this passive transactional experience to an active, engaging one.
Right.
Okay, let's unpack this. Getting out of the supermarket and growing your own vegetables sounds idyllic. It really does. But isn't that a massive luxury for a lot of people?
Oh, absolutely.
Because we're talking to you, the listener, who probably has a full-time job, maybe kids, a daily commute. We can't all just forage for heirloom tomatoes at a local farm on a Tuesday night.
That is a very valid critique, and it's a really common pushback against the pure whole foods movement. It can demand a significant amount of privilege in terms of time and money.
Right.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, Pollan's advice is less about achieving this pastoral perfection and more about initiating a mindset shift.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning you don't have to become a farmer to stop letting a deceptive food label dictate your choices. It's about bringing the intention of the farmer's market into your everyday life, even if you are just navigating your local conventional grocery store.
That's a great way to look at it.
And the best way to bridge that gap between rigid perfectionism and practical reality is to introduce a vital nutrient that the traditional diet industry almost entirely ignores.
Yes. This is my favorite part of the entire deep dive. Let's talk about the missing element, vitamin P.
Vitamin P, pleasure.
According to our source from Healthline, eating for pleasure isn't some indulgent sin you have to confess to a trainer. It's a biological necessity.
It really is.
The sources note that when you experience true pleasure from your food, your brain releases dopamine.
And that dopamine release goes far beyond simply feeling happy for a moment. It actually serves a profound physiological function.
Wait, really?
Yeah. When you sit down and genuinely enjoy your meal, that pleasure actively shifts your autonomic nervous system into the parasympathetic state. Biologically, that's known as the rest and digest mode.
So you're saying that the psychological joy of a meal acts as a biological trigger for the parasympathetic system. The joy is literally a digestive enzyme.
That is a fantastic way to put it, yes. When your body is relaxed and experiencing pleasure, your digestive tract receives more blood flow. Your body physically breaks down the food and absorbs the macronutrients and micronutrients much more effectively.
That's amazing.
But if you're eating a plain dry salad while tensed up and stressed out at your desk, your nervous system is trapped in the sympathetic state.
The fight or flight mode.
Exactly. And when you're in fight or flight, your body actively suppresses digestion to route energy to your muscles.
Oh, wow.
So you could be eating the most nutrient-dense meal on the planet, but if you're miserable, your body is simply not prioritizing the absorption of those nutrients.
It's funny, we're so conditioned by traditional diet industry narratives to think healthy must mean punishing, but the biology tells us that the punishment actually negates the health benefits.
Exactly. It backfires completely.
But we do need to make a really clear distinction here, because I know what you, the listener, might be thinking right now. What is the difference between eating for pleasure and emotional eating?
Yeah, that's important.
Because on the surface, they sound very similar, but our sources emphasize that they're wildly different experiences.
They are fundamentally different in their psychological mechanisms. Emotional eating is essentially a coping mechanism. It's using food to numb out uncomfortable feelings like stress, sadness, or anger. It's heavily characterized by mindless consumption. You know, you're eating to distract yourself, so you rarely even register the taste or texture of the food. And it almost inevitably results in feelings of guilt or shame.
Right. It's eating to actively avoid an experience, whereas eating for pleasure is highly intentional.
Exactly.
You're choosing a food specifically to savor it. You're present for the taste, the texture, and the environment. It's mindful, and crucially, there's no guilt afterward.
Right, and the sources also highlight how this ties into our social and cultural well-being, too. Denying yourself the foods of your cultural heritage because a restrictive plan told you they have too many carbs, that's actually a form of emotional deprivation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Sharing food is a cornerstone of human connection. To support this, Harvard Health offers some wonderful, actionable advice on cultivating more vitamin P.
I loved their tips.
Yeah, they suggest treating your meal as an event rather than a chore.
Yeah.
Set a proper table, even if it's just a mundane Tuesday dinner. Notice the aromas. And one of the most accessible strategies in the sources is the 10% rule.
I love the 10% rule. The premise is so simple. Ask yourself how you can make your current meal just 10% more enjoyable.
Right.
Maybe it's throwing a handful of sharp goat cheese onto a basic functional salad. Or maybe it's just taking 15 seconds to warm up a brownie in the microwave to release the aromas instead of eating it cold while standing in the pantry.
Yeah, those small tweaks matter.
But here's where it gets really interesting. If pleasure aids digestion and is a biological necessity, someone might ask, well, isn't there a danger of just eating a giant bowl of ice cream for every single meal?
Yeah, it's a natural question to ask when we start framing pleasure as a health metric. But this is exactly where the mind-body connection of genuine pleasure comes into play.
Okay, explain that.
Well, eating a bowl of ice cream is undeniably a pleasurable sensory experience in the moment. But eating ice cream for every meal, think about the biological feedback.
Oh, you feel great.
Right. Your body would experience a massive spike in blood glucose, followed rapidly by an insulin surge and a subsequent terrible crash. You'd feel lethargic, mentally foggy, physically bloated.
Yeah, that sounds awful.
That physiological aftermath is deeply unpleasant. True vitamin P requires listening to your body's holistic feedback, not just the momentary sensation on your tongue. It bridges the gap between fleeting taste and sustained nourishment.
So your body actually genuinely enjoys feeling energized and clear-headed just as much as it enjoys the taste of sugar.
Exactly. That distinction changes everything. It's about the complete biological experience, not just the first bite.
But we have to acknowledge the reality of modern life here. I mean, we do not always have the luxury of time to set a beautiful table and savor our meals.
Very true.
Sometimes we're commuting or running between back-to-back meetings, and we just need a quick snack. So how does this biological need for mindfulness and pleasure translate to the reality of snacking?
The first step is to completely normalize the behavior. Snacking gets a terrible reputation in diet circles, but global data from the PFNDAI source shows it is a completely ubiquitous human behavior.
Oh, everybody does it.
Right. In France, people snack on average about 4 times a day. In India, 97% of consumers report snacking daily, and 70% do it at least twice a day. The issue we need to address is not snacking itself, it's passive snacking.
And passive snacking is incredibly easy to fall into. It actually reminds me of doom scrolling on your phone.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Right. You open an app just to check one notification, and suddenly you look up, an hour has vanished, your eyes hurt, and you feel mentally drained. Mindless snacking is the exact same trance.
Totally.
You look down, a whole bag of chips is gone, and you didn't even register eating them, let alone enjoy them. So how do we actively break that trance when our hand is already halfway into the bag?
Breaking that trance requires a deliberate, conscious pause. The sources define mindful snacking as the practice of paying attention to the present moment without judgment. It begins before you even open the package.
Okay, so before the first bite.
Exactly. You have to check in with your internal state. What are my actual needs right now? Am I biologically hungry, or am I just bored or stressed or seeking a distraction from a difficult task?
You have to identify the root cause of the craving.
Yes. And if you determine that you are genuinely hungry and you decide to eat the snack, the next step is vital. You must actively engage your senses. Notice the texture, smell it, and perhaps most importantly, chew it thoroughly.
The data on chewing is fascinating. We usually think of it just as a way to avoid choking, but the physiological benefits of thorough chewing are massive.
Oh, it is the crucial first step of digestion.
Yeah.
When you chew thoroughly, you're mechanically breaking down the food, which drastically increases the surface area.
Right.
This allows salivary amylase, which are the enzymes in your mouth, to begin breaking down carbohydrates before the food even hits your stomach.
I had no idea it started that early.
It does, and this early breakdown reduces the amount of fermentation that happens later in your gut, which significantly reduces bloating and gas. Furthermore, as we discussed earlier with the Okinawan philosophy, eating slowly gives your brain the necessary time to register satiety signals.
It's all connected. If you inhale your food, you consume far more than you need before your brain can even wave the white flag.
Exactly. Mindful snacking forces you to reflect on the experience while it's happening, which naturally regulates portion control.
And the data even mention how the food industry is responding to this desire for portion awareness, like Mondelez is creating their 100 kilocalorie packs.
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting shift.
And the goal there isn't to trigger a restrictive diet mentality, but to provide a real-world tool that helps people visually understand what a moderate portion looks like when they're, rushing out the door.
They act almost like training wheels for mindfulness.
I love that. So chewing slowly and checking in with ourselves helps immensely when we are already reaching for a snack. But how do we set up our environment so we aren't constantly making these high-stakes decisions on the fly?
That requires looking at how we prep our week.
Which leads us directly into registered dietitian Kara Harbstreet's anti-diet approach to meal planning. Her core philosophy fundamentally reframes the entire chore.
It really does. She argues that we need to stop viewing meal planning as a restrictive cage that we lock ourselves into every Sunday afternoon.
Right.
Instead, we should view it purely as an act of self-care designed to reduce kitchen chaos and decision fatigue during the week.
I love how she completely dismantles the myth of the perfectly curated 7-day, 21-meal prep that just dominates social media. We've all seen those images of 20 identical plastic containers filled with dry chicken breasts and steamed broccoli.
Oh, yeah. It looks so rigid and joyless.
It's so joyless.
And it is rigid, and rigidity is fragile. If your schedule changes on a Wednesday evening, your entire meticulous plan falls apart. Harbstreet suggests planning for just 2 or 4 days at a time to maintain agility. Or, if you operate better with some structure, utilizing theme nights to eliminate the daily burden of deciding what to make. Tuesday's pasta night. Thursday's clear the fridge night.
And my absolute favorite strategy from her is to work backwards.
Yes.
When you sit down to look at your week, block out the nights you know you're going to get takeout or the nights you know you'll be eating leftovers first.
Right.
If you realize you only actually need to cook from scratch 3 nights this week, the sheer volume of the task plummets and the whole endeavor suddenly feels completely manageable.
Building flexibility into the system is just key. She also offers a stark warning about where we source our recipe inspiration.
This is huge.
She advises readers to be highly skeptical of food blogs that lean heavily on meaningless marketing buzzwords like clean eating or strict keto.
Yeah, those terms are everywhere.
Furthermore, she points out that those automated calorie calculators at the bottom of online recipes are notoriously unreliable. They cannot account for natural variations in produce or how much oil you actually use in the pan.
Right, it's basically a guess.
Exactly. So if looking at those numbers triggers anxiety, her professional advice is to ignore them entirely.
Instead of stressing over unreliable numbers, the focus should be on small, sustainable changes. The single-ingredient foods and Harvard Health sources outline some fantastic low-effort swaps that don't require overhauling your entire pantry.
Yeah, really simple stuff.
Like, simply swap standard white bread for a fermented wholemeal sourdough, which is just better for your gut. Use olive oil instead of solid fats like butter when you're sautéing vegetables. Reach for a handful of almonds instead of potato chips.
And try packing your lunch just 1 day a week to start. It saves money, and you have complete control over the ingredients.
But if you feel like your cravings for highly processed, hyper-palatable foods are completely overriding your intentions, there's this incredibly interesting biological reset button you can press.
Ah, yes. The taste bud reset. This is a highly effective experiment.
It's fascinating. The challenge is to go just 2 days without adding any salt to your food. It sounds bland, and frankly, it'll be quite boring for about 48 hours. But there is a biological reason for doing this.
Yes, it leverages neuroplasticity. The taste receptor cells on our tongue have a rapid turnover rate, but the gustatory cortex in our brain recalibrates its baseline for detecting salt even faster than that.
Oh, wow.
By cutting out added salt for just 48 hours, you are literally forcing a neural adaptation. Your brain recalibrates its sensitivity.
So it's like wiping the slate clean.
Exactly. Then, when you resume normal cooking, the only rule is you must taste the food before you salt it. It breaks the mindless autopilot habit of shaking salt over a plate before you even know what the food tastes like.
You're resetting your baseline so you can actually taste the food again. That is brilliant. And all of these small swaps, resets, and mindful practices are designed to support the ultimate anti-diet philosophy, which is the 80-20 rule.
The best rule.
The rule is simple. If 80% of your diet consists of the single ingredient, whole foods that Michael Pollan advocates for, then you absolutely do not need to stress about the remaining 20%. Have the warm brownie, order the Friday night takeout, enjoy it with zero guilt and maximum vitamin P.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? How do we handle that internal frustration when life gets chaotic and we hit, say, a 50-50 ratio for a week?
Right. What happens then?
To me, the 80-20 rule functions exactly like a household financial budget. If you generally save your money and pay your bills on time, and then one weekend you splurge on a really nice pair of shoes, you don't declare bankruptcy.
Right. You don't panic.
You don't sell your car in a panic. You just go back to your normal spending habits on Monday.
Yeah.
The 80-20 rule means your dietary habits can absorb a little shock without collapsing. It's built for reality.
That budget analogy is spot on. You do not need to overcompensate, fast, or punish yourself. You simply resume your mindful, flexible baseline at the next meal.
The entire goal of diving into these sources today was to give you practical ways to reclaim the joy of eating. We started by looking at how reductionist nutritional science and deceptive supermarket marketing trap us in this cycle of confusion.
And we found that the path out of that trap isn't memorizing more chemical data, but simply simplifying our approach.
Right.
It's embracing whole foods and recognizing that vitamin P pleasure is an essential biological requirement that physically optimizes our digestion and anchors us to our cultural roots.
And we learned that snacking is a completely normal human behavior as long as we break the doom-scrolling trance and chew our food mindfully to aid digestion. And finally, we realized that meal planning is actually an act of self-care. It's about utilizing small 80-20